again for WIP seminar 2 in a row. We have the pleasure today to receive Pierre Walckiers. Sorry. I'm deeply sorry about that. Who will present us a conference entitled Reconstructing International Biodiversity Law for Society. I cut something. Yeah. For Society Just Futures, Insights from Decolonial and Feminist Approaches. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just a quick presentation of the idea and the narrative of the presentation. It's part of a broader research project, a broader research group at the Ecology Research Lab, a new research center at the University of Liège. We are starting from the legal perspective, but we are also asking questions that might be of your interest. Because we want to look at biodiversity law in general and profound inequities and difficulties that we are facing on biodiversity at the international level, and combining Western science, indigenous knowledge, and environmental justice from a legal perspective, but also asking this question between the dialogues between knowledge systems. My talk will be divided in two main parts. I will first introduce the general research project, where everyone in the teams try to fit. So the DecoLawBiodiv project, where we have the ERC starting grants, and I will discuss a little bit more on what I am doing in this project and give some hints and insight for my research, my PhD research that I will have the pleasure to defend next week with Charles as president of the jury.
So if you're wondering why, I promise I'm not being a jerk by not asking any questions. I just already had all my good questions. You didn't for next week.
So the first general project is on the decolonization of international biodiversity law, and we are discussing some of the main issue at the international level. We are starting from the Convention on Biological Diversity, one convention adopted in the framework of the Rio Summit in 1992. It's, among other things, it's established a system of access and benefit sharing, where states can negotiate genetic resource, and if they are commercializing it, selling it, or using it, and they have benefits from it, they can they need to share the benefits. But these negotiations are impacted by a lot of struggle between and deep conflict between global north and global south, and this access and benefit sharing is challenged. Some argue that it's also ineffective because you can negotiate with one country to have access to a genetic resource, and finally can negotiate to another one or another community and still have access to one specific genetic material, commercializing and giving the benefit sharing to only one of the partners. That's one of the examples why it's struggling. Another example of the difficulties are that they want, under different specialized treaties, they want to have a special treaty on plant genetic resource, or the seeds treaty, where they establish a multilateral system of access and benefit sharing. They put the states agreed to put the genetic resource on a common pool, and with a multilateral system of access and benefit sharing. So far, we have only, as the treaty was adopted in 2001, we had only one contribution to the benefit sharing system. Most of the financing are voluntary basis. And so the key player don't want to play the games, and it's why sometimes some people in the literature talk to this treaty as a mechanism of access without benefit sharing. But despite this difficulty, we are still continuing into this access and benefit sharing framework. And we have now another level of difficulties with the sequencing of genetic resource, the use of digital sequence information, or what we call digital sequence information, as so it's without relying on the physical genetic resource, the industry, research companies, or even here at UCLouvain, when we want to have access to a genetic resource, we can just look to the sequenced genetic resource, doing our experiments, doing our analysis based on that, and without activating any benefit sharing mechanism, because we are saying that it's only the immaterial information and not the physical genetic resource. And these questions are addressed for more than 10 years of official negotiation. That is a topic that is highly technical, and with failure to address the deep inequalities between countries, stakeholders from this structure. And in this research project, this research group, we want to go a little bit deeper into the level of conflict in access and benefit sharing, because having participated at 2 of the governing body, but with other members of the team that were participating in all the sessions of either the Plan Treaty or the Convention on Biodiversity, we can see that the question of access to genetic resource or the use of digital sequence information is a subject of dispute. But beyond these elements of dispute, there are this underlying level of conflict, the process, the mechanism of access and benefit sharing, but also the negotiation rules, the power dynamic between actors. And in my research, I'm also looking to the ontological backgrounds and the vision of nature that are create and reinforce in this framework. So one of the goals of our research team is to advocate for enhancing ecological law. It includes unpacking the roots of the access and benefit sharing framework and DSI in the North-South divide. Understanding different actor interaction, but also the power dynamics and the understanding of the access and benefit sharing rules, and to co-create a decolonial framework for international biodiversity law and decentralizing the anthropocentric view of nature and digital sequence information. We are also participating into this negotiation. For example, last governing body, we released a policy brief on our interpretation of the treaty to argue that this sequencing technology should be handled under the framework of this treaty and instrument. And we are following, trying to have a common methodology among all the members of our team. It includes the classical and legal and social science methods, and in law, for example, the interpretation of the treaties and the soft law instruments, the literature review, integrate empirical research methods, including participatory observation to the negotiations and interviews with actors, and integrate elements of decolonial research. One of the members of the team developed a methodology that is the Circle of Dialogue of Wisdom, but it integrates itself into the global decolonizing research methodology paradigm, where we integrate within our research framework the attention to the epistemic justice and injustice, the fact that our knowledge production is situated in a global North university with our own blind spots and biases. And within the process of the research, we look to continue to building a relationship and social-oriented justice. This is one of the examples of circle of dialogue of wisdom, where in different case studies held by members of the team, we want to create this mechanism of relationality between farming communities, indigenous communities, where we are with who we are working at. So we are paying attention to the relationality, the respect, the reciprocity, and the dialogues of the knowledge in general. So in the 5 following years, we will have three different case studies, with one in Bolivia, India, and South Africa. And what we want with this methodology, we want to amplify some voice of farming community from the global south, and to bring this knowledge into the negotiation of access and benefit sharing, where we are still stuck with, as we argue, a technocentrism prism, Western ontology of nature, and colonial dynamics. This is just to show the face of the people we are working with. We are working from different places around the world, but we are mostly based in Belgium. And I will now develop a little bit more on one aspect of the project that I have done in the case of my PhD. So looking to the politics of scientific arguments in this access and benefit sharing framework. In fact, I'm also expanding on one presentation that I've given 2 years ago here, where I was at the middle of my PhD, and just after one meeting of the governing body of the Plant Treaty, where I analyzed the politics of scientific arguments in those negotiations. And now I think as I'm at the end of the PhD process, I can give a little bit of more general overview on the process, and discussing a little bit more on the seeds, like the ontological cuts that go to the seed. But I will go first of all on a rereading of the different level of conflicts in the access and benefit sharing framework. So I will start with the seeds that we have on slide. That was in fact seeds that were given to me from an indigenous seeds keeper when I was doing a research in Canada, and where I'm keeping to relationship with the indigenous seeds keeper, because I'm reseeding every year those seeds, and I'm trying to multiply there, or just to a little bit evolving with the seeds, co-evolving with the seeds, and understanding how it works. But so far we have these seeds at the international level that is now being sequenced and used. So we have the digital sequence information that is the genetic data, genetic information around the seeds. And at the international level we have different political conflicts on for example, some countries are placing national measures on the side, for example, regulating access or benefit sharing around these genetic resources, even around those immaterial genetic resources. There are also, for the scientific or some of the scientific perspective, will need and that are asking for having or to keep open access to this genetic information, because they need this information to for their research. And so we have at this level different conflict between states, farming communities, indigenous people, scientists from the global north, scientists from the global south. And these negotiations are also affected by technical questions about, for example, the scope of what we call DSI. So is it only the DNA, RNA, the proteins, the metabolites, the different metadata? But if we are talking about immaterial dimension of seeds, can we include indigenous knowledge system, or in the language of the treaty, traditional knowledge, into the scope of the treaty? Is it relevant or not? So those are scientific questions, but that leads to this struggle. We have also legal contestation. So if we don't know, we have disagreements on the question whether this genetic information fall under the scope of the treaty, and question of epistemic injustice with the type of knowledge that are heard in this negotiation, either to understand what constitutes a genetic resource or the type of knowledge protected under this framework. And we are, in my thesis, I'm also looking to the underlying ontological conflict with like the deep-rooted conflict or identity-based conflict between countries due to the history of colonization, exploitation of genetic resource, or the biopiracy practice, where some companies are doing bioprospecting, sequencing a genetic resource, claiming intellectual property right, and then constraining the access to this genetic resource. But also ontological controversy with, for example, in this negotiation, dualist vision of nature on something that is how material to be exploited, or universal lines of genes without any cultural or social or spiritual elements. In my research, I'm combining different methodology and different disciplines, but I'm doing it mostly from the legal perspective, so combining legal technique, legal theory, but also opening to political theory, philosophy of law, and philosophy of science. And in the course of my thesis, I integrate post-human theories. That's where I would say it's linked to Biodiversity, Stengers, Haraway, Latour, and different Bennett, Barat, and different currents that want to share the post-humanist and post-anthropocentric ambition. But it's also this, I would say, this choice of this theoretical approach helped me to make dialogues between different critical theory and generation of theory between, for example, feminist, decolonial, science and technology studies. And, but more pragmatically, it's also a way to link different philosophical concepts within a legal environment that is very reluctant to discuss these concepts within their own epistemological framework. And I'm using this theory, for example, to look to the ontological cuts. So the process that is also scientific, legal, discursive material that are creating dichotomy, either to like the dualist or modern dichotomy between science and politics, nature and culture, fact and value, or within my research environment, material and immaterial, tangible and intangible, visible and invisible. And I'm looking to see the regime complex from this perspective, so the plant treaty, but also different instruments. Just to give you an illustration with these ontological cuts, we have these seeds that are governed by a different set of rules, but some of them are cutting the seeds from naturalist cuts. For example, the GMOs directive is making a cut between conventional plants and genetically editing plants. Or we have the biotech directive on the patentability of genetic material that make a dichotomy between an improved plant and a plant that is only a essentially biological process that is associated to the conventional plant, so associated to the nature, and so that is not patentable. At the European level, we had a new genomic technique regulation proposal introduced by the European Commission in 2003, who introduced another kind of cut, because we are to determine if we are on conventional plants or not. We are looking to the type of the number of nucleotide modification. And it's also an arbitrary number, but it's a way to make these cuts between the two plants. We have a physicalist cut with the physical plants and the immaterial components that we discussed, and we have also temporal cuts with one of the ruling of the Court of Justice of the EU, who make a cut between the genetic edited plants before 2001 and after 2001. Those before were considered as conventional plants, and those after were considered as GMOs. I'm also, from this ontological perspective, looking how law and science contributes to this dichotomy. For example, where there is a physicalist divide between material and immaterial, or between humans and non-humans, that will separate the peoples, the farmers, from the plants, the physical plants, from the genetic elements, but who is also separated from the human immaterial elements. So, for example, personal data, farm data. And when comparing this different system, I could see, for example, difference where we have some continuity between farm work, where some other are claiming these ontological cuts are something indivisible. And we have this, for example, discontinuity between physical plants and intangible elements argued by country of the within Europe, and Europe is claiming that at the Plant Treaty or at the Convention on Biological Diversity to make this distinction between raw material, the immaterial informations to continue to use genetic resource information, but this relationship between personal farms data and people and farmers are reinforced through this European framework, because we have this, for example, health data space where we are continuing to make this thing. So it's why I'm using this methodology or theory of ontological cuts to see where there is continuities and where there is discontinuities, and identifying this strategic use of discontinuity. In my research, I'm also proposing a relational approach that tries to move beyond this dichotomy and seeing what are these relationships between these elements. And because I'm evolving in a legal environment, I'm also theorizing a legal tool with the right of relation that want to focus and to protect these relationships that are undefined, sometimes ontologically unstable, but could be protected by the tools of law. In this research, I focus in particular to the scientific arguments into this negotiation, and all the scientific arguments, when embedded in its own ontological framework, can create these ontological cuts between material and immaterial. Into this negotiation, I could analyze two types of effect of this scientific argument, either to orient the political choice, where science could be used as a guide to guide the policy process and to explain what is the good solution to take, but also as a goal. So, for example, to protecting science as such, states are arguing to not regulate DSI because they want to keep DSI open access or to keep statu quo, and there science is used as a goal and end in itself, or for example, for the progress of humanity, we have to keep this data. It's also a way to impose a technocentrism prism or something that will depoliticize the discussion, but there is also a loss of relational dimension between human and seeds in its cultural, spiritual relation. Like all these relationships are erased in a technoscientific process, and also not because there is this, I would say, structural continuity. We are into the database. We have no links with the science, like the cultural, spiritual element of seeds. It's just lines of data. And argue that scientific argument is also used to shape legal interpretation, for example, to impose a definition of genetic material or genetic resource that is physical, creating and strategically using ontological cuts. In this research, also so with this relational perspective, comparing different instruments regulating plants, and I could see in denouncing the research to play off, on the one hand, separating the immaterial elements from the physical plants when we are talking about benefit sharing, disclosure requirements on patent system, but kind of continuity with the intellectual property law system, where we have different instruments that make the link between the genetic information, the protected material, to cover the plant and its immaterial elements by property instruments, but the same state who put in place this legal system claims a difference between the immaterial elements of plant variety when it's for accessing benefit sharing purposes. Finally, because I want also to reconnect with this co-construction of knowledge and dialogue of wisdom approach that is common to our research team. My research concludes on a cosmopolitical exercise of the plant treaty interpretation. So I could see into the textual element of the treaty, but also from its subsequent development, some hints and some legal elements in the text that could be interpreted through different perspectives, different ontology, different language of justice, because we have, for example, the reference to Mother Earth, the notion of actual or potential value of a genetic resource, the social or economic interest, all this language that is, I would say, at first drafted in a technical way, or I would say these instruments were drafted in a technical way, but as it's part of the negotiation, some states, some indigenous communities, some farmers representatives can advocate for pushing within the negotiation and the drafting of the treaty for the language of justice, for the terminology, and that's something that I'm arguing that we could not ignore while interpreting this treaty, and that we cannot ignore the interpretation of these ontological elements while interpreting law, that we cannot interpreting them only to a Western scientific prism, and as it was something negotiated with a plurality of actors, their own ontological perspective, epistemology should be also taken into account while interpreting international law. And it's why I could include in my research a collaboration with Dr. Janice Brand's seed keeper and co-founder of the Kentucky Seed Sanctuary, and Alex Alexis from University of Montreal, where we discussed this dematerialization element. And this paper is arguing from this indigenous perspective that seeds are indeed social and relational entities, and talking with these wampum bells, a traditional legal exercise to materialize, with materializing the responsibility between human and seeds, that is the preservation of the physical seeds that we can see, but also including the preservation of the knowledge, the songs, the culture that we need to continue to remember in order to keep alive these relationships between human and seeds, and between human from it, because we have two people, this individual line, the seeds, but the seed is also within this wampum belt a way to connect with humans, non-humans, ancestors, and that's one element where I'm concluding my research, comparing the plant treaty and this one pond belt as another kind of treaty and discussing the legal ontology of the two. This question I will finish with a small invite on a conference that we are organizing at the University of Liège in 2 weeks on this digital sequence information negotiation, because it's now it will be 10 years of negotiation without significant progress with the same struggle and that we share among different fora, because I'm from the seeds perspective, from the seeds treaty, but this question of dematerialization also arises in global health law, biodiversity in general, for marine genetic resources the same, or for intellectual property law. And so in this conference we are discussing all the elements of the sequencing technology. I will now finish my presentation, and thank you very much.
Short break, yeah, and after that, plenty of time for discussion. Not yet, but I will say.
If there's anyone online who has a question, don't hesitate. I can read them out from the YouTube chat. So.
Question, Victoria?
Thank you for the talk. I missed the point about the dematerialization, about the continuity. What exactly, which kind of continuity, in which context? Can you just
Okay. So the point of discontinuity and recontinuity or continuity discontinuity is so I'm looking with post-human theory in general, but in two arguments in parallel. And first of all, I'm also supposing that the legal system is performative and enacts this continuity or discontinuity because it creates connection between the tangible and the intangible. At some moments, it creates discontinuities, and that's something that because law is a bit arbitrary at the end, it can create this discontinuity. But the scientific discourse, the way the cultural discourse can also create it and influence in the legal interpretation. But what I'm interested is how in law we have, from an external perspective, from the legal perspective, a discourse of continuity or discontinuity that will influence the legal interpretation. And for example, we have this definition of genetic material where we have this continuity, discontinuity discourses. That if we have, for example, a Western geneticist approach to seeds, it helps to create a discontinuity. But if we include knowledge from indigenous knowledge system or from farming communities that explain this relationship between the physical seeds, but also the knowledge that we need to have to take care of them, or the ancestor or the cultural dimension, there the continuity, discontinuity is also blur a little bit. And I have two, I would say, legal arguments. Is either the post-human property approach. I think that we have this in law, this idea of very binary thing, for example, dichotomy between facts, value, objects of law, subject of law. And that's if we are looking from the property perspective, and because there is this capitalist interest, the law can include a lot of elements that are of different manifestation or different ontological elements, I would say, in a same system to commercialize it or to facilitate the enclosure and the commercialization of it. And so we have, I'm using the theory of Janice Cole on post-human property, but we have also, for example, Katharina Pistor, who explain how the legal system helped to commercialize elements that in fact were either sacred, like sacral, or commons or untouchable, but it helped to commercialize it. Another approach that I'm looking at is from the other perspective, so looking to the analysis of Brad Sherman, IP lawyer, who explained that the patent system, in the course of its evolution, evolved in a very different manner to integrate intangible elements, because the science at the time had different metaphors for its inventions, the chemical compounds, the genetic information, and all of them were translated in different manner in legal system according to their understanding of the biology at the time. But at each step, the legal system adapts itself to integrate these intangible elements, often with a tangible sign of the intangible. And so with like the critical perspective and the patent perspective, I'm looking how the system are like could make links or discontinuity between the material immaterial elements, and all what interests me a lot in the PhD or in my research is how states, state negotiators, state actors, judges are using this dichotomy and this discontinuity as something very fixed, clear, indisputable, saying that okay, genetic material is only the material, and so not the immaterial element. Often in the policy process, they don't develop that much. It's just saying it and considering it as self-evident. But I think that there is a lot of step and discursive step also that make this connection or this connection. And looking from this perspective, I'm arguing that these ontological cuts are strategically created and reinforced by states, by the global north states, to avoid any access, benefit sharing obligation or any rules on access, and using this genetic information that are linked to the genetic material, but as they are relying on this ontological cut, they are strategically using this to interpret the law in a manner, the international law, in a way that's convenient to them politically. Thank you very much.
No, I didn't have any.
You raise your hand?
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, it answered my question. But I didn't remember raising my hand, but maybe I did.
Okay.
No, it's
No, I'm quite sure.
Okay, my bad.
I could be confused.
No,
Other
it's
questions? Azad, and after Daniel.
Okay, thanks a lot for the talk. I was just curious, you were mostly talking about genetic sort of materials and genetic information, and in the context of sequencing, how it plays out. And you also said that one of the sort of structuring axes is this material and material dichotomy. I was interested whether you observed the same kind of dichotomy in other cases. For example, if we talk not about genetics, but about, I don't know, pharmacological companies looking for different new chemicals in plants everywhere. Is there the same sort of dichotomy and the same sort of legal problems rising from this fact, or you think it's different?
I think like you mean if I could see different type of dichotomy within other legal environments, or if the same dichotomy applies in different legal environments?
Yes, whether it's the same sort of material and material dichotomy which apply. I just in, for example, in the case where I don't know almost anything about this field, but I know that there is also some legal controversies regarding the fact that, for example, I know a group of, for example, Belgian scientists will go somewhere and then they will study local plants, and then they will find some new chemicals, and then they will build a pharmacological, I don't know, treatment here, and then sell it, something like this. And I know maybe some countries trying to protect these as their sort of biodiversity resources. And I was just interested whether you think there is the same sort of problem of distinguishing or not distinguishing material, I don't know, plants from immaterial, just, I don't know, knowledge of chemical formula.
I think that's so. Thank you very much for your question. I think that in the general bio industry, I could see this material, immaterial elements, either in vaccine development, in drug development, marine genetic resource. In fact, we have a different legal instruments for each type of specific material, because we have the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the main framework for all genetic resources, and different specialized instruments. And there is the same distinction between the material, immaterial, and the struggling, even if we are talking about animal materials or chemical compounds. But I would say that the struggle could be different in other instances, for example, UNESCO or the Unidroit Convention, because there we are talking about bioheritage or stolen heritage, or from legal perspective from one specific countries, because some are adapting the legislation on genetic resource in the same manner for genetic resource and for cultural heritage and for biocultural heritage, and we can see this like there the continuity between the tangible, intangible, or the visible, material, immaterial is fluid, because as we are talking about genetic heritage, there is the continuity. In I would say artistic or indigenous cosmology, indigenous perspective, there is also the dichotomy between visible and invisible. That is also a way to make the distinction. And for some negotiators at Plant Treaty, we can also argue that the genetic information exists and are physical itself, but it's not visible as such. It's just like too small to be detected, but it's not something as completely immaterial. But in the end, I think that I could see different way where the dichotomy material-immaterial will emerge around the sectors. But I think that this dichotomy might also be influenced by the past legal discursive environment, because if we are in a treaty drafted in access and benefit sharing language, then there will be this language use about genetic material, and there is the immateriality of it. But if we are talking to a cultural heritage treaty or instrument, the dichotomy will appear in another manner. But I think I'm associating it to a certain extent to a path dependency, but it's something I don't have concrete evidence or data to explain, just similarities.
Okay. Daniele?
Yeah, thank you. I was curious about the power symmetries in the political arena and in general the negotiation arena where ABS obligations are discussed, and I would like to know something more on their weight in influencing how ABS obligations get implemented.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will be a little bit academic or like explaining the legality of it from a public international law perspective, and then discuss more informally on the power play of negotiation into this form, because we have so different legal instruments. It's negotiated by countries as members of the treaty. Some treaties are working by consensus, some other are working by unanimity. Then there is the implementation in national legislation, and for example, we have access and benefit sharing focal points in Belgium, but also in other countries, where they make the contact with the user or provider of genetic resource, and making also links with indigenous or farming communities. And so in this negotiation, we have different, I would say, type of actors, because we have the states who make the rules according to the general principle of international law, stakeholders, industry, us academic, we can be observers, we have indigenous people representative or farmers, but we don't, and now I'm more politically speaking more on a political perspective or from my situated perspective. There is huge difference between the player in the faculty to influence negotiation process. And first of all the countries are not part of the same treaty, so sometimes there is an asymmetry. On the plant treaty, we have, for example, the US, but the US is not part of the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's influencing it, it's negotiating and explaining their positions, and it's influenced the process, but they are not officially part of it. In the plant treaty, we don't have some big player like Russia or China. So it's also influenced the way of the negotiation are done, and the interest of the different committees are not the same, because, for example, we have in country in, I would say, the south or in Africa, where they want to protect national sovereignty over the genetic resource, and that the state is the owner of the genetic resource, and because as they are sovereign, they can negotiate the condition to access and benefit sharing. But for the indigenous people perspective, the fact that it is the state who is the sovereign over genetic resources is not good for them, because they are struggling also against the states, and they want to have also a word into this negotiation. And we have more recently the latest negotiation show a different position against with the global north, who want to keep using this data accessible, with the US, Canada or Europe claiming that genetic resources are only material, and the South wants to have a part in the sharing of benefits or regulating the access to the genetic resource, and indigenous communities or farmer communities who are, I would say, in the plant treaty more afraid of patenting of genetic resource. So position of states to govern access and benefit sharing to gain some funds from the access and benefit sharing mechanism is not convenient for the farming community, so they don't have the same interest there into the negotiation. And I'm using also the framework of Global North, Global South, but there are huge disparity between the actors, because there are actors who also use a lot of genetics DSI, China, India, and where the place in between the two blocks into the negotiation, depending on the interest of the states. But latest plant treaty negotiation, it collapsed because the negotiator couldn't find an agreement on the process, and we can discuss a lot on that, but there is also the question of the technicality of the language, the number of delegates that are not the same between countries, the fact that it's mainly in English, so for a Spanish-speaking or French-speaking country it's not as accessible. That the treaty is driven, or I'm arguing that the treaty is in a biotechnology friendly framed, and so the industry is very influenced there, but I think that there is a lot to discuss there, but I don't know if you have any other question or...
Yeah, no, but is there a unitary international law on the patenting rights for this kind of entities? I mean, vegetable species or genetic codes or what else?
Yeah, but there is, I would say, the World Health Organization, or World Intellectual Property Organization, where on SIDS we have two main treaties, the TRIPS, Trade International Related Aspect, I'm not exactly sure, but TRIPS agreements, and the UPOF on the plant breeder rights. It's two types of intellectual property, either it's patents or it's plant breeders' rights to secure for those who discover a new variety or technical elements of plants. For example, you have gene edited plants, then you can secure intellectual property rights. And I think that these instruments are sociologically speaking, less environmentally aware treaties. So it's mostly for business. So they have less representation of indigenous farming communities, and it's basically to patent these genetic elements. But it also have a power play into the negotiation, because while the environmental treaty is also covering aspects of the patent system or the intellectual property right, in the negotiation process, we can say that, okay, no, that's the patent issue that should be negotiated elsewhere, and so cut quickly to negotiations when they are going to the patent question, and to keep this negotiation on access and benefit sharing or biodiversity conservation, and limits the political maneuver to discuss on the politics of seeds appropriation.
Can I ask a follow-up? No, it's just curiosity. In the case if I have a new variety of a species and I want to patent it, can I obtain such kind of patent even if I don't have the complete genetic information concerning that new variety, or I don't know, there is the possibility for somebody who comes later and with the whole genetic analysis of this new variety, that agent could claim a patent on the genetic information, while there is already a pending patent on material variety.
Okay, that's something I think I'm not able to answer now, because it's technical, and I don't have that much of practical knowledge on what are the steps and what are the possibilities in practice. But you can ask for a plant breeder rights if you can demonstrate that you have a variety that is distinct, uniform, stable, and that it's a new variety. And you can claim a patent if you have I would say technical elements into the plants and on the genetic information, but on how it works in practice, I think it's beyond my area of research.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'll ask one. I think I understood most of your argument to say that the intangible-tangible distinction should not be there, or at least should be amended for the fair sharing of the benefit. What I don't understand is what is the argument of your adversary? Is it just bad faith? Because it seems to me, like you said, that in patent we already extended to intangible. We patent algorithm now. So we patent even if you push a button on your phone, which does not exist, blah, 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 blah. So why this does not apply to other kind of intangible, like genetic information? Because I can understand why they don't want to apply. They don't want to share the profit. But do they have an argument? What is the best argument against you?
Well, I'm a little brainwashed with my own research and my critical perspective, but from what I could see in the negotiation, states are negotiating either like informally or to state submission before the negotiation, and there the argument were, I think, kind of poor, because they're just saying that the DSI is immaterial, and we have a definition of a genetic material, so it's material, so it's not applicable. Well, to be fair, there are different specificity of how you argument it, because you are looking at it from a public international law perspective, and we have different rules of argumentation. And the main rules of argumentation are codified in the convention, the Vienna Convention, the law of the treaty, when we say that the treaty or elements shall be interpreted according to its text, its context, its object and purpose in good faith. And so we can interpret based on the text, based on the context, so looking to the other article of the treaty and think, okay, this is material because, or this is not material because we can see that we have these elements based on the object and purpose of the treaty. But as its negotiation purposes, we don't have the time or the opportunity, or all the states don't go into this negotiation. They just claim that because it's material, then it's limited. But we have also like states are also using studies, and we have expert opinion that also interprets the treaty. But I think that in the end, the interpretation, like from a legal perspective, you can argue in, would say the two way, but what I'm defending is that the other way, like the physicalist interpretation, doesn't make sense with the context, the object, and the purpose of the treaty, and to have looked to like more expert-based interpretation. Some of the arguments were a little bit of bad faith, and what I'm also discussing is some arguments relying on Western ontology with the dichotomy between natural, culture, material, immaterial, where it's used to prove the points. But if you look to the treaty from, I would say, more open-minded perspective, you can.
I have a follow-up. This is cool. This is actually something that I wanted to ask you, like at the champagne reception after your defense. So I'll just ask it now. But it's a perfect follow-up. Do they mobilize? One thing that I expected to see in these arguments, and I was a little surprised that I didn't, have they started trying to mobilize things around open science?
Yeah.
Because that's something that I expected. I mean, that at least is a positive epistemic argument. I don't think it's a good argument, right, to be clear, but like, you know, look, all the data should just be in the publicly accessible sequence database, right? Because we believe in open science here, and so every single sequence just has to get uploaded. It doesn't matter, you know, how we got it or where it came from, because that's what you do with all of the scientific data, right? So is that, are we,
yeah.
Obviously that's new, right? That's only the last, 5 years or so that we've started really talking that way, but.
No, but to be, I would say it's most colleagues who are present in the negotiation, so academics from the natural science background, because they are also present in this negotiation. They are also using this data, and they want to. Because
you've got natural scientists and you've got guys from whatever, Monsanto or whoever that are, and that's also interesting because you've got those perspectives colliding in these negotiations, right? Those are guys with very different goals and very different.
Please finish back on this.
A link with the epistemological framework that is used in the negotiation, but also the interest of the epistemological communities as such, because some states, they don't, as it's like a policy brief, it's not really detailed on how they explain in the interest of the scientific community, and science is good for everyone, so we want to keep open access. And then it's scientists at the table of the negotiation, or like who argue for open science, open access to this data, and
I'm going to be on the open science comité de pilotage for the university soon. So this is I'm like feeling this out. Yeah, so I want to make sure these arguments are represented when we talk about our policy.
There is again different way of arguing for open science, like open science or fair science, and it's not because it's open that it's bad as such. And also, I think it's the because there is also the indigenous data sovereignty, and how they can decide to make it open, to what conditions, so there is different way to make it open in would say epistemically fair way. But I think that the negotiation, if you have a good argument, you don't need to develop it. You pick it up and you say, okay, open science, is a good element. You use it and to defend the status quo. And then when you have negotiated what you wanted to negotiate, then you don't need to go in the whole axiological element of this argument.
But I would add that this argument is already dead once you accept patenting genetic code. Because if you say, okay, it's knowledge, and knowledge should be accessible to everybody. Knowledge is not something, it's not a thing, but the plant is a thing. Okay, that's what the researcher will argue. Of course, the plant is owned by these people there, but the knowledge of the plant. But once we accepted, and maybe that was a mistake, but we accepted to patent genetic code. So we patent that the genetic code is a tool. Or patent because if you look recently, the pattern in computer science in California, it's not even on the code, it's on what the code could do. A button that is moving from left to right, that's the pattern. It's not, it's programmed in Python 2 or in C++. It's the thing, the abstract thing in the ether.
Because they're design patents.
Yeah,
you can't patent
in the ether, I don't see how, in that case, you could argue, not in bad faith, that it's part of the thing. And there's a continuity between the actual plant and everything you can do as a tool from what you can extract from the plant. So even according to American law, it seems continuous. So I like your argument about patent, because you don't need super complicated you don't need to convince people decolonial theory. Already they accepted that, they are in bad faith.
No, completely agree.
Of course, if you add a decolonial position, it's even stronger. The argument is even stronger, of course, because there's a justice problem there. But once we argue, it's unfortunate for our scientists, but pure knowledge does not mean anything anymore. As pure knowledge. Pure knowledge is just tools that are not used yet. It's depressing. Okay, sorry. Other questions or comments? Or if you want to say something about that.
No,
okay.
I'm agreeing with your argument.
Other questions or comments? Oh, sorry.
So yeah, I have another question. So you're sort of trying to. So you sort of titled your talk "Insights from Feminist and Decolonial Perspectives," but then you also started talking about sort of post-humanistic, post-anthropocentric perspectives, and I think for me it wasn't clear how these two things are connected, because when you talk about, let's say, decolonial perspective, you talk about, indigenous community and, for example, their ontology in which the, nature, culture, people, non-people distinctions are very, very different or non-existent at all, and this clearly connects it to sort of post-anthropocentric whatsoever, but is there another sort of more direct connection between these two approaches in your work?
I think that it's also how I evolve in my research, because and it's also to connect my research with the broader framework of our research team who use feminist and decolonial methodology, but not really acquainted of post-human theories. And I think it's also part of the, I would say, I'm the only philosopher in this research team, and I'm doing my PhD in law. So we are looking at it from more a social science perspective, but the question of ontology is also driven by this decolonial or feminist perspective. For example, at the start of my PhD, I was looking into how science is perceived as neutral and objective, and where I could see two sides of the contestation, as the feminist theory or the decolonial perspective. And it's also, I would say, a kind of pattern from my epistemological community, because in legal environment, we are not that flexible in terms of theoretical framework. So we have a good faith in science, and so in legal discourse, science is seen as objective, as neutral, as something neutral, and it's would say challenged, but timidly, or a little bit challenged by these theories. But the choice of post-human theories was also a way to integrate in my legal environment theories from feminist, decolonial, science and technology studies, and all the, I would say, Latourian framework in a coherent structure that could be, and also a little bit strategically here, readable for legal scholars, because it's a current that is constructed and used by legal scholars, so it's something more accessible to bring into the legal scholarship. And then the post-human theories have the ambition to bring in dialogues different perspectives. There are also, when, for example, discussing the interaction with international law, they are bringing within the post-human theory the argument from the third world approach to international law, so critical approach to international law, and see how it's evolving with the theory, or it brings the feminist approach to law, and see how it's evolving. And I think that some of the authors that I'm using in this framework are very transparent in the way that where this different discipline and their own theoretical approach are evolving to each other, responding, and it's why I'm also using it to make the dialogue, but also to make the constraint of element of doubt and hesitation more suitable, because it's also theories who accept element of doubt, of partial knowledge, discomfort. And for example, it was one element that I experienced when I was doing my research in Canada and doing research in indigenous context. It was that I was very ill-equipped to deal with indigenous ontology, even though I have like this legal and philosophical approach. It's mainly a history of Western philosophy that is like not like it's very interesting, and I'm very glad to have this background. But to deal with indigenous ontology, it's not like it's not because I have like this philosopher who talked about ontology. In the end, it was not something concrete to help me to dialogue with these elements. And I think that post-human theory is not something that will provide tools to dialogue with indigenous context, but it's also helped me to clarify these elements because it integrates how different theories are exchanging between the two, and so all my discomforts in indigenous context also influence my way to do research in law and my way of mobilizing ontological literature.
Okay, I have another one. If there's nobody. Yeah, I wanted to ask you how does it work, the status of expert during these negotiations? Because in law, there's many conception of expertise. I know that in Francophone country, often the expert is the expert of the court. So it is supposed, he or she is supposed to be objective. And in the British system, each one bring their expert. So it's completely different. You're the expert of the party you're moving. But at the international law, is it the expert of a country? Do they have a status as an objective, or how does it work?
No, that's a good question. I think that I would say that my main area of research was international law, international negotiation. I have not looked to judicial decision. Some elements I used, but it was part of the literature review or elements where I could see this difference. And I think that element that I wanted to ask with the ontological question was not an element that I could bring to the judicial literature. Like I just looked to the international law, so it's elements to limit my expertise on it. But there we have the different treaty, and we had with the Convention on Biological Diversity, so the main treaty, one moment where states asked to have expertise on the side, so to define what's a genetic source, what's the scope of a genetic source, or to deal with genetic source, or to have a traceability with it. In practice, they established an ad hoc technical expert group on this issue, who is composed by members appointed from states. So they are experts, but have this hat of states, member of indigenous communities. But I don't know if they appointed someone, but it was supposed to be in the composition. And they also asked experts studies, commission studies on the issue. And it's academics who provide it. I think that they could claim this notion of objectivity because they are not giving the knowledge to someone for the negotiation. But it's also part of the argument that I'm making in my dissertation, because it's also expertise from its own ontological community, and with also the interest to have, for example, open access to the SI. Like even in good faith, there are limitations in the process, and I think that the ambition to have this science policy process was to depoliticize a lot of technical elements that were contentious, and in the end, it didn't work that well because we are still stuck to this negotiation. Now we have also countries who also commission studies on it to provide the knowledge for the negotiation or the argument. And I could see different types of studies, like technical studies on this side. So how do you use this data? What's the purpose of the data? But also expertise on the legal issue. So what's the relationship with, is it part of the treaty or not? What's the relationship with patent law? And I think that there the studies could be used in a more instrumental manner.
They would surely not bring a study saying exactly the contrary of what they negotiate.
But we had for the EU, they commissioned one studies, and it was clear for the authors of the studies, but because there are also lawyers from this legal environment, it said that, okay, it should be part of the treaty. And it's like option one, most favorable option, and then different option. It was for the European Commission, but yeah, that's in the end, as I said, like the argument from states were mostly like political statements, so they don't go into the arguments.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments?
But I have maybe just a precision because it's something that I still want to look at. Is the really the practicality of, and I think it's difficult. I'm in contact with two of the secretariat to ask this question, and it's still something difficult. But who is contacted when, why, what's the justification? Because it's still a technical matters, and it could presented as something just automatically you appoint an expert. But I think that there are a lot of choice that are not clear, and from states negotiators' perspective, some are critical about the way of how experts are appointed there. But it was not I didn't go into this question for my PhD.
But that makes a big difference because clearly, for example, if the experts are named by the subcommission inside and they are the expert of the group, they don't have the same status that everybody bring their expert. So in the American system, legal system, clearly they don't believe that science is really objective, ultimately. So you have reason to bring your expert. It makes sense. Even if the expert is not just repeating what, because he has or she has a reputation to keep, but still they are the expert of the defense.
Adversarial system.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that the confrontation of expert, you get to the truth. In the more French system, is that no, science is outside the game. So you're the expert of the court. But at the level of treaties, I see how it's very comfortable, because if a state asks you for an expertise and they don't like it, they won't use it. But I understand that if it's at a higher level, a commission naming the expert, everybody will be, we don't like the way they were chosen. So it's quite complicated to include some scientific knowledge in the process.
It's a cool question.
Not a simple problem at all.
No, it's cool.
Still, the objective you said was to try to put some question, these are technical, they should be solved by the scientists, and these are the political that didn't work.
Yeah, that's one of the arguments, because I'm critical of these technical, political elements. That was an argument held by a colleague, Alexei, on this discussion, saying that, so using the Latourian framework, that in fact negotiators wanted to have a neutral objective fact on that, and it didn't work.
Of course. Other questions? Comments? Is it beer time? Question online?
Nope.
So let's thank again our speakers.